Welcome to the Marshall Pruett Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported by PNC Bank. Very happy to have my friend Scott Dixon on here for about 15 or 20 minutes, talk about his brand new contract, an extension to stay with Chip Ganassi Racing for 2019 and beyond. Don't know exactly how much the beyond is. I might save some of that speculation, some of what we've heard a little bit for our Week in IndyCar episode coming up here in a day or two, but good to speak with Dix. Great to get a feel for what it was like at this stage of his career to have so many suitors coming his way, offering a bunch of things that might not make it into print, but knowing that everyone from Roger Penske to McLaren Racing to DTM teams, V8 Supercar teams, came knocking, came offering, and he chose to stay with Chip for at least another year or two, and we will see if and what happens in the future. He also spoke about that a little bit, since he did have so many people asking to dance, and he did decide to stay with his long-standing partner of 17 years. What do you do with those who inquired? And so, spoke about that a little bit towards the end. Also spoke about what it was like knowing that there were some really high-powered folks interested in securing his services. What was it like getting a feel from Chip Ganassi and the team as a whole about how much he means to them? That's part of this. Maybe, I'm not saying it's important, but it gets lost a little bit. You find out when you're on the market how much not only those who might want you are interested, but also maybe the one who wants to get you back, what they think of you. So went into that a little bit. One revelation or two in here. He didn't go into specifics, but mentioned that there could be some other major announcements coming on personnel and such. And so, yeah, exciting times, but also good to catch up with Dixie here, who's just been a fairly awesome member of the IndyCar community for so many years. It's also really nice, too, to have him on for the first time a week after his primary sponsor, PNC Bank, has come on for a 3-month supporting role here on the Marshall Pruett Podcast. PNC is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Everyone tunes in on race day, but so much of the race is determined off camera during the work put in throughout the week, month, and year. From the gym to the practice track, Scott Dixon and the team take small steps every day to get closer to victory lane. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. You know you can get every episode of our lovely little Marshall Pruett podcast on iTunes, on Podbean, on Spotify, and also on our Facebook page, the Marshall Pruett Podcast. A little bit of a sidebar. Just started work. It's going to take a little while, a couple months probably, because my awesome web designer is very busy. That's why he's awesome. But we have a new Marshall Pruett Podcast website that is being developed, and that will be the one home where you can get every episode we've ever put up, more than 300. Listen to them, search for them. We're going to try and break them down into show features, so the regular weekly shows like the Week in IndyCar, Week in Sports Cars, our audio features with race cars, be it in-car audio or ambient, the features that we do, the My Life and Racing Career Series, Who the Hell Are You, etc., etc. So probably a couple months away from that, but looking forward to having that, and also a place you can go to and find all the super easy methods to subscribe. All right, off we go with our man, Dixie. Well, Dix, I just spoke with our boy, Mr. Stefan Johansson, your manager, and it sounded like he was throwing huge duffel bags of cash into his bank there. All kidding aside, what's it like putting this behind you, mate? Because I know you've read plenty from idiots like me and others talking about potential future for you. Is it good just to kind of hit the mute button on this and move forward with your career and season?
I think, not just for me, but I think for all parties kind of involved, it's nice to get some closure. I think going back a step, I think each time we have been in this position, there's always been, talks and, I think it's for Chip too, that it's a good idea, obviously, to look at the landscape, and not just teams in IndyCar, but looking at the future for different reasons. It's always wise. I think this year there was a lot more talk, obviously, with some of the different parties that are involved, which I think is is exciting in general. For the series and for the drivers, for the teams. I think it's a big deal. So for me, it's nice to have the release today, clear the air, make sure everybody's on the same page. And as always, we're focused on what's at hand. But nice to have a little bit of closure on a couple of different things.
So I'm going to get into the team side and Ganassi and future and all that stuff in a minute, but I did want to stick more on a personal vein here with the interest that was shown for you. I mean, obviously with Steph, it's his job to go out and, on your behalf, gauge interest. If folks are, expressing interest, sending in inquiries about your availability, it's obviously on him to look after a lot of that process. But what's it like for you, Dix, now, so far into your IndyCar career? It's one thing to be, at the end of a current contract and have nobody calling. It's another thing to have, sounds like the minute word got out, Jesus, dude, whether it's DTM, the V8 supercars, you name it, it sounds like a lot of people were really interested in your services. It's maybe a bit of a softball, but how does that feel? Because you could have others could have the opposite, where it's crickets and they've got nobody coming in.
Yeah, no, it's obviously, it's flattering and it's good to be, obviously it's good to be in a situation like that. I think it's fairly easy to clear through, a lot of that stuff quite quickly. But there's definitely, some great teams in IndyCar alone. For me, it's probably important to look slightly further ahead. Maybe, it's always difficult in motor racing, from one year to the next. It changes, and the fundamentals can change quite quickly. So it's, you kind of got to do it in a couple of different phases. But it is great to be in a position like that. And people like, Chip or Penske or Andretti or even the likes of McLaren, have, a long list and a fair picking of talent and direction that they want to go, whether it's different series or drivers or whatever. So, it's not me just in this situation. They all have options too. It's just, everybody's trying to find their way and making sure it's, a situation that's going to work, at its best for all the different parties.
So when I think about some of my favorite sports teams, not just racing, but sports teams throughout the years, you often find a situation where they have one central player. I guess most recently we might think of LeBron James, for example, where the Cleveland Cavaliers and now the Lakers have gotten a hold of the guy and then built around him. Even though he didn't own the team, there's no question it's LeBron James' team, and the decisions being made are all pointed towards helping him lead the organization to a championship. Would you say that was a big part in your reasoning to return to Ganassi? Because if I'm thinking about some of the other places you might have had offers from, super strong as well, but I don't know if you would be in that central position like you are right now.
I think in some ways it's maybe, slightly different, especially for drivers. Yes, there's ways to, build certain things, but, you got to be careful too. There's a reason why, Chip and everybody involved has been so successful across, many different platforms and series. And, even if you look at Chip, with a relatively short and young team owner situation, he's almost ticked every box possible.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different reasons. You got to look at the partnerships, such as PNC to Honda to the team to NTT Data to teammates, engineers. There's so many things that a lot of people sometimes forget. That makes these teams, tick over, and there's a lot of resources and a lot of people that you don't even, get to see at the track. There's tons of shop-based people that are huge talents and make every bit of what we achieve possible because of their hard work. So, I think it's, to me, the realization is it's definitely very much about the people. The people to me are pretty much, what it's all about. Whether it's the mechanics to the pit stop guys to the engineers, to the whole environment. The team, and you also want to be in an environment that you thrive in. Some situations just aren't going to be right for you. So, I think you kind of run, scenarios through your mind, but there's also time for change. There's time for when you maybe need to make a bigger step. So those always not easy to make, but I think in this situation, when it came down to total crunch, there was a fairly clear vision.
You mentioned change, which was my next question. Some people in general roll with changes, and they can thrive, or it might take a little while, but they will find a way to make whatever new team, new engineer, new engine supplier, whatever it is, might take a little while, but they're not averse to change, and they'll find a way to make it work. What's your comfort level on this topic? Because the thought, at least, of packing up your locker and walking into a new shop next season or whenever and starting over with others, I think that would be daunting for anybody, but maybe even more for a champion like yourself, or not so much?
I think there's right times, right? I think that's where, I think a lot of people come to a conclusion at the right time, and it's different for everybody. I think, when you're welcome or you're not, or you enjoy the environment that, you've been working with. We live in the business of change, right? Every year, every week, the track's different because of a different aero kit, to the engine, is different, to the tires being different, to the weather being different, so it's we do live in a constant change environment. So it's important sometimes to look at the fundamentals to remain the same as well. So, I think you have to roll with, some things, but, the big focus being, on what really makes the difference. And again, it takes me back to the people that are involved, that's what really, especially in the current formula and I think teams, in general, when you look at success, it's really because of, the people that work there. So, at some point, or, whether it's, Chip's choice, my choice, there will be change at some point, right? It's inevitable. It's inevitable for all of us. I guess the easy thing for me was right now at this specific point, this was, the right decision.
PNC is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Scott knows that the road to victory lane starts today. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. Last couple of questions, Dick. So we covered a bit about the sensation of feeling that desire and interest from other teams. I know our pal Mr. Ganassi might not be the most touchiest, feeliest guy in the world, but what did you learn about how you were viewed and the importance that Chip felt for you as really a part of the foundation at this organization? Because from what I've heard, he didn't even want to think about going racing without you, but it seems to me like times like these with contracts up for negotiation, maybe you get an even better feel for how much you mean to someone or a organization as a whole.
I think, in our situation and me just speaking about the topic, I can't speak for Chip, but, for you got to look at 17 years with anybody, that's one hell of a relationship. And for us, we've had success. We've had some, low points as well, but, I think Chip too is the way that he's that some people see him. I feel like, I would do anyway, but I have a different, relationship with Chip. He's actually, he's got a very big heart, and when the cards are laid out, man, he's there to an extent that a lot of people don't get to see. He's actually a very loving person, and to his fault sometimes, probably, that can maybe affect his judgment sometimes. But, he, I don't know, again, it goes back to, the environment. I love his passion for racing. His success, definitely shows that. But the way I've seen him go through adverse, situations, even with, Dan Weldon and Justin, and he has a very big heart, and knows what really means the most. So, to me, he's a lot of fun to work with. At times he can be tough, but I think that's, extremely valuable in the same breath, the fact that you've got someone from the top, expecting the results that all of us know well that we need to do, but, it's good to get a little Chip pep talk here and there.
Maybe that's actually a reason the two of you get along so well, because one of the comments I see on a more regular basis than I thought I might, is about you and, the Iceman, and we don't get to see a whole lot about who he is, etc. But, we know in the paddock that, as I've said many times before, whether it is a Dan or a Justin or anybody that needs help, you're the first guy there. You don't want any recognition, and you're not there for anyone from a publicity standpoint. So it's interesting to hear that you and Chip are very similar in that capacity. Well, I guess last question or two, Dix, is looking at where this team is going now, knowing that they're going to have you for another year or two at least. You mentioned once or twice this year, without going into real specifics, that there are some things internally, maybe, I don't know if it was specifically the 9 car or the team as a whole, that weren't gelling maybe, or weren't working exactly the way you wanted. As much as you're comfortable, are there any things in that area that as you look to next season where you think, okay, we need to make some changes, or have things smoothed out in whatever areas those were?
I think there's always things that you can, work towards, fine tune. There's sometimes, and I've spoken to it before, right? It's almost, sometimes you get a bit stagnant if you have the same group doing the same things, right? It's the first sign of insanity if you keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. But, it's I think the team has some exciting things coming. I'm not sure on timelines, and mostly it's just personnel, which, that's not been my decision. It's something that they've known for a while, that they feel like they can improve on, or not, and not just in IndyCar. It's across the board, and with the Cup side, and also with the GT. So, if I wasn't excited, I wouldn't be with this team. I'm excited for what they have coming, for the plans that they have in the near future, but also, I think the success that I think this team, is known well for, and hopefully, long into their future, and even without me, that it's definitely going to continue. So, I think it's this business is always changing and it's evolving, and it's something that I think has been a topic of conversation at the team, and they're working hard at it.
Last question for you, mate. So you have signed on for, 18th year, probably 19th year? I mean, you could be sending a kid to college by the time we get into this next contract. You obviously still, though, have had a lot of people expressing interest. How do you approach that going forward, right? And I'm thinking, well, you had quite a few people knocking on the door. You said, nope, I'm staying home, staying where I am. But there's going to be an end to this next contract, and I would assume probably some of the same people knocking on the door. Do you just leave that to Steph and say, all right, Mr. Manager, earn your money? How do you, keep that in a separate place to be taken care of whenever that time might come?
I think for all of us, that's a process of what we do, right? It's motor racing, as we all know, from year to year changes drastically. I've always had 1 year deals, 2 year deals, 3 year deals, sometimes. So it's nothing new. I think it's something since when did I sign my first contract? I think it was probably when I was 19 or 20. So wow. It's always a process, but you try to plan for it. But even that is difficult. Where the series is, where your head's at, to what's available. There's so many moving pieces that there's no point really focusing on it until it really comes to to the crunch time. Of the period where you start talking. So for me it was trying to go through the process. Stefan obviously tries to get the options, look at the feasible ones, see what really has substance, and then investigating a little bit more, and then making a decision. Those, to be honest, every time at that situation have been different. So it's not something I really dwell on. I look at for the right now and what we can achieve. With the current team, and for us now the focus is, it's always been the championship this year, just now with a little more clarity as far as, not having to talk about too many other things outside of the current championship. But yeah, I don't know, like I feel like it's part of the process. It's part of something we've always done. That's part of, what every driver has to go through. Some years are a little easier than others.
So now with your big new contract in place, you think Franchitti will take you out and actually pay for dinner? Or is he going to stiff you with the bill?
I think he must have robbed a bank, mate, because he's been paying a lot lately.
What?
His arms have grown much longer.
No way!
His pockets are deeper. Yeah, I don't know. I think he must have won the lottery. So I'm going to be asking for a loan, mate.
Exactly. Well, I just bought a couple of racing T-shirts, and I'm like, well, I know he'd like a couple of them, so I grabbed a couple for him, and I know I'm going to hand those to him. He's going to say thanks, and I think those alligator arms are going to reappear. So
no, they got much longer, so I'll make sure you do it when I'm there, and I'll tell him to get his wallet out.
Good man. See, I knew you had my back, Dick. Hey, brother, thanks. Not only thanks for your time, but happy to see that, as I've told you, even better, we got PNC Bank supporting this little podcast as well.
Yeah, it's mega, man. Thank you. I'm excited. Can't wait. Thank you for the kind words.
And that was our boy, New Zealand's finest, Scott Dixon. Interesting, knowing that he's going to be back at Ganassi. Like I said, I'll save some of this for the week in IndyCar episode, but there's some knock-on effects here. I think that there are a few drivers, one or two in particular, who woke up and prayed and then thanked the Lord for having Scott Dixon stay with Ganassi, because there were some potential changes, some higher profile drivers who might have been out of work had Scott not been retained by Ganassi. So silly season isn't over. There's still a lot going on. Not everything I can write about or my Racer magazine colleague Robin Miller can get into right now, but Dixon's the biggest piece on the board, and we know where that is slotting in. Still leave some others that are going to be certainly interesting to follow as we go forward here into the coming weeks, once we wrap up the series, wrap up the championship in 33 days, and then we have a whole off-season of fun that is coming. All right, I'm Marshall Pruett. This is the Marshall Pruett Podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported by PNC Bank. Thank you for listening.